Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about Icelandic composer Jón Leifs, or as we call him in the US of A, Jón Leifs. Whatever works, it's fine. You'll know who he is. His years were 1899 to 1968, and he is one of the most fascinating characters in the Romantic nationalism / European avant-garde because, because of his dates. Because he was a seriously 20th century composer, as you can tell, but he was a composer in a place, Iceland, which had yet to go through the Romantic nationalist folk music influenced kind of musical period. And so you get this wonderful combination of contemporary aesthetic. That is, he didn't care about traditional harmony particularly. He was very interested in Icelandic folk music. He was very interested in using the largest resources of the modern orchestra. And he's just an incredibly interesting character. And the BIS series of his music was one of the most exciting things happening in the past couple of decades. And I had the great good fortune to be invited to Iceland to see a performance of some of this stuff with the Icelandic Symphony. And the irony of it is that, Iceland is a fascinating place. It really is. I've talked about being there before. It is a small country with big things in it. I don't know how else to describe it. There aren't a lot of people. There aren't a lot of trees. There's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of lava. And it's really a workhouse for the forces of nature, all of which is reflected in Leif's music. But the thing that was so fascinating for me is that one of the double bass players in the Icelandic Symphony, Richard Korn, who I believe is still there, I just looked online, it seems that he's still there, is from Milford, Connecticut, as was I, and he was my mother's Hebrew school student. And his mother and my mother were friendly, and it sort of go to the Iceland Symphony. I looked him up, and we had dinner in a Thai restaurant, if I'm not mistaken. It was really, really cool because we were both from Milford. There we were in Iceland, and talking about Jón Leifs. So yeah. It was great. It was absolutely great. I feel I have a connection to the place. Anyway, Leifs wrote a bunch of pieces about the natural wonders of Iceland, and they're all recorded in this series. And of course, I performed in one of them, not with the Iceland Symphony, but the recording on Ondine with the Helsinki Phil of Hekla, the volcano, the volcanic eruption, which is just amazing, written for an enormous orchestra and a choir and 22 percussionists, and I was special guest anvil soloist. That recording is on Earquake on Ondine. There's one here, and frankly, ours on Earquake is better than the one here, just because they had a much bigger orchestra. The Iceland Symphony is not the biggest ensemble. They only have, for example, 6 double basses, one of whom was Richard Korn. But they play very well. And, you've heard the recordings, I'm sure, on Naxos and whatnot. I mean, they're a very good orchestra. And they play this music, except for Hekla. Part of that was the conducting on that recording was a little flabby, but this is wonderful. This has Shao conducting. And the stuff on here is so much fun. I mean, it really, really is. So I have to sort of explain to you what it is and how it operates, because there's some really, really nifty things here. I suggested there are 4 Icelandic natural disaster pieces. One is Hekla, one is Geyser, which is named after Geyser. Geyser is the thing that gave the international vocabulary the word geyser. And it's actually been dormant, I think, since the 1950s or early 60s, somewhere around there. But there's one right next to it called Sturkelthur, which goes off with, extraordinary regularity. And I've mentioned that the Geyser National Park, which is, where this, volcanic park, has a visitor center with the widest selection of Pringles potato chips I've ever seen in my life. Flavors I've never heard of, and I've heard of all of them. But anyway, let's see. So we've got here Let's see what's on this thing. You've got first his organ concerto. Oh, for his Opus 7. The organ concerto is insane. I mean, it's supposedly based on some Icelandic folk thing, but you'd never know it to hear it. It's a big, crazy, dissonant, hysterical, single movement piece of total mayhem. It uses a sledgehammer, he borrowed the Mahler 6 sledgehammers, and it's just banging and trashing. It was destroyed in its first review, its first performances, as being mere empty noise. I love it. It's just incredible fun. So there's that, and it's fabulously well recorded, by the way. This is one of BIS's real knockout sonic spectacular recordings. Then you've got the Variazione Pastorale, Opus 8, the very next work, Variations on a Theme by Beethoven, Pastoral Variations on a Theme by Beethoven. I'll let you figure out what the theme of Beethoven is. A very, very quirky set of variations that covers an enormous range of sonority and variety of timbre and texture. And then you've got Fine 2, Farewell to Earthly Life, for vibraphone and string orchestra. Only 6 minutes, exquisitely beautiful. And by then, his idiom had become the most refined version of Icelandic folk music, which moves basically in parallel fourths and fifths, like organum, and has very little, filler harmony. It's really quite haunting. It sounds very primal and timeless. An extraordinary piece. And by the way, he wrote a Fine 1, which was supposed to be his farewell to earthly life, but he didn't die soon enough. So he wrote a Fine 2, where he made a second attempt to say farewell to earthly life. It seemed to work that time. And then last but not least on this amazing disc is Dettifoss. Now, Dettifoss is one of the other natural disaster pieces. Well, it's not a natural disaster. It's a natural nature grandeur piece. Let's put it that way, because you've got Hekla, as I was saying, and then you've got Geyser, and then you've got Hefis, which is drift ice, and then Dettifoss, which is this huge waterfall, which we also visited when we were in Iceland. I mean, although the funny thing about going to see Iceland is they had this greenhouse where they were attempting to grow bananas. And they had succeeded in having one fairly, well, how shall we say, emaciated looking plant with this one pitiful little banana thing hanging off of it. But it was the Icelandic national banana, and the tour bus stopped so we could buy, Icelandic wool sweaters and stare at the banana. And then we went to Geyser and then Dettifoss and all that stuff. Anyway, it's a waterfall. And the piece is, you approach it gradually and the roar increases and then it recedes. It's got a choir and a baritone solo screaming at you in Icelandic about like how cool the waterfall is. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. This is such a fabulous recording because it gives you an entire overview of Leifs' work, from his early organ concerto and his crazy dissonant avant-garde idiom to the variations. I wouldn't call them neoclassical, but it's the variations. And then his very last work, one of his very last works, it's his Opus 56, and one of his famous nature symphonic poem things. It's stunning, and you're going to want to hear it. It is without question one of the greatest recordings ever. And I'm not saying that because I felt a certain personal connection as a result of Mr. Korn's participation in the Icelandic Symphony Orchestra. It had nothing to do with that whatsoever. Trust me, it's the music, folks. Just the music. So keep on listening, friends. Take care.